Jax Carter had never imagined that a simple scouting mission could change the course of his life forever. The stars had always been his friends, endless expanses that promised adventure, freedom, and a chance to leave the cramped cities of Earth behind. But as he drifted through the controlled chaos of the Interstellar Council's detention chamber, he realized that freedom could be a dangerous illusion. It had begun 2 weeks ago, when the human exploratory ship Aurora had slipped through an unmarked corridor near the Varen sector. Jax had known the protocols. He had studied the interstellar maps, memorized every restriction, and yet, in a moment of arrogance or perhaps overconfidence, he had ignored them. He had not expected that a scout ship would be enough to provoke an entire planetary defense fleet. The Varens, known throughout the galaxy for their precision and relentless discipline, had intercepted the Aurora in minutes, forcing it into orbit around Vera Prime. Now, he sat in a cold, metallic room, the walls humming faintly with the energy of containment fields. His hands were cuffed to a rail, but he could move enough to pace. The chamber was clean, sterile, and intimidating, the kind of place designed not just to hold a prisoner, but to make him understand that the universe had rules far beyond human recklessness. The door slid open without warning, a faint hiss cutting through the silence. A figure entered, tall and imposing. Jax's heart rate quickened, but it wasn't fear that struck him first, it was disbelief. The being before him was humanoid, vaguely, but she radiated an authority that humans had no words for. Her skin had the muted luminescence of moonlight, and her eyes were deep pools of color that seemed to shift as she moved. Her hair was streaked with silver, framing a face that had seen centuries of calculation, conflict, and power. "You are Jax Carter," she said, her voice smooth but commanding, resonating with an accent he couldn't place. "Yes," he said cautiously. "And you are?" "I am Zara of Vera," she replied. "I am assigned by the Interstellar Council to oversee your sentence." Jax blinked. Sentence. He had expected a warning, a reprimand, maybe a few weeks of confinement while Earth negotiated some fine. But sentence. "Sentence for what?" he asked, trying to hide the trembling in his voice. Zara studied him for a moment, as if weighing whether he deserved the truth. "For reckless intrusion into Varen territory, for showing disregard for council law. Your species has been given a chance, and you have endangered it." Jax's stomach dropped. He had read about the council's punishments, the rare cases when entire human delegations were judged, fined, or worse. He had thought those were distant tales, exaggerated warnings. But now he was living one. "The council has decided your punishment will be unusual," Zara continued. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "You will marry me." Jax stared at her, convinced he had misheard. "Excuse me." "You heard correctly," Zara said, her tone unwavering. "Marriage, you are to become my consort, not as a reward, not as an honor. As a punishment. The council believes this will teach you and your species the consequences of reckless actions." He laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "Punishment, marriage, you're saying this is some kind of humiliation." "It is both," she said simply, "and it is final." Jax felt a surge of anger, disbelief, and oddly fear. He was not prepared for this. Not for a legal sentence that bound him to a centuries-old alien diplomat. Not for a punishment that carried implications far beyond his understanding. And yet, the council had spoken, and their decisions were law. Over the next days, he was moved into Zara's residence, a towering structure of glass and metal that seemed to float above the sprawling cityscape of Vera Prime. Everything about the place was foreign and overwhelming. The walls shimmered with soft light, the floors responded to his steps, and objects floated lazily until commanded. Every day, he felt like a small child in a world designed for beings who had lived centuries beyond the lifespan of a human. Zara's demeanor never changed. She was strict, precise, and unyielding. She introduced him to the customs of her people, the way they ate, the way they spoke, the rituals that governed every minute of life. Jax stumbled constantly, offending her unintentionally, breaking social protocols he hadn't even known existed. And yet, there was something in her observation that intrigued him. She was not cruel, not unnecessarily harsh. She was calculating, assessing every action, every word, and every gesture. She had lived long enough to see the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and he felt both awed and insignificant in her presence. The council had made one thing clear: love was not part of this arrangement. This was punishment, not partnership. And Zara adhered to that principle. She was distant, professional, and completely untouchable. Jax tried to push past it, tried to engage her in conversation, to provoke some reaction beyond the formalities, but she responded only with quiet detachment. Still, Jax could not help but notice her subtle ways of testing him. A question asked at a particular time, a challenge presented in passing, a situation that seemed designed to fail him if he were careless. Every day was a trial, and he was beginning to understand that surviving the Varen expectations required more than human stubbornness. It required intelligence, patience, and courage. One evening, after weeks of adjustment, Jax found himself standing on the balcony overlooking Vera Prime. The city lights stretched endlessly, like a field of stars mirrored on the surface of the planet. He felt small, yes, but he also felt a spark of something dangerous, determination. He would not be broken here. He would learn, adapt, and survive. Zara appeared behind him without a sound, as she always did. "You are improving," she said simply. Jax turned, startled. "Improving? Yes," she said, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "Not in the way I expected, but in a way that commands attention. Perhaps this punishment will teach you more than you realize." He didn't know what to say. He didn't understand her, and he didn't yet trust the intentions behind her words. But one thing was certain: his life had changed forever. And for the first time, he felt that perhaps being human, with all its flaws, might be exactly what he needed to survive in this alien world. The punishment had begun, but Jax Carter was already plotting. Not escape, not rebellion, not yet. First, he would learn. And then, perhaps, he would find a way to turn even the strangest punishment into a chance to prove humanity's worth. The stars beyond the balcony twinkled in silent witness, vast and indifferent. But Jax, a small human among them, felt the first surge of defiance. The council could sentence him, the Varens could impose their rules, and Zara could test his every move. But they could not strip him of one thing: his spirit. And in that spirit, the first seeds of an unexpected journey had been sown. Life in Vera Prime was nothing like Jax Carter had ever known. Every day was a test, every moment a puzzle, and every word he spoke carried weight he did not yet understand. Zara's home, though magnificent and imposing, was also a battlefield of intellect and tradition. Jax quickly realized that surviving here required more than courage. It required observation, patience, and a willingness to admit ignorance. The first week was the hardest. Jax stumbled constantly, committing offenses he didn't even recognize. He poured the ceremonial drink incorrectly, spoke at the wrong moments during council-style dinners, and even misstepped in the most basic rituals. Each mistake earned him a cold stare from Zara or a quiet correction that reminded him of his place. He felt like a child in a world built for centuries-old beings. Zara, as always, remained composed. She never raised her voice, never scolded. But her silence carried more weight than any punishment. Jax found himself walking on invisible lines, trying to anticipate her expectations and failing again and again. At night, he lay awake, frustrated, questioning everything he thought he knew about humans, aliens, and the universe itself. Yet, for all her discipline, Zara was not cruel. She provided instruction, subtle guidance that tested his mind more than his body. One morning, she handed him a datapad containing the Council's history of interstellar conflicts. "Read this," she said. "Understand the logic behind their decisions. The universe is not merciful to the careless." Jax nodded, secretly feeling a spark of excitement. For the first time, he was being challenged in ways that went beyond physical skill. The universe, vast as it was, seemed to be offering him a puzzle, and he liked puzzles. Hours passed as he absorbed stories of diplomacy, strategy, and survival. He saw the patterns, the mistakes, and the clever solutions. Slowly, a realization dawned. Humans, despite their flaws, had traits even the Varens admired: courage, adaptability, and the ability to act in ways no algorithm could predict. One afternoon, Zara arranged a practical test. She led him to a simulation room where holographic scenarios unfolded in real time. Alien diplomats, hostile factions, and environmental hazards appeared in waves. Jax's task was simple in explanation but nearly impossible in execution: protect a convoy traveling through dangerous territory. At first, he panicked. Every choice seemed wrong. Every decision felt weighted by centuries of alien logic he could not yet comprehend. But then instinct kicked in. He remembered lessons from Earth, from video games, from his own experiences as a pilot. He improvised, deviated from the expected path, and took risks that a Varen would never consider. To his surprise, the simulation adapted, recognizing the value of his unconventional approach. Zara watched silently, her expression unreadable. When the simulation ended, she finally spoke. "You acted differently than expected, risky but effective. Perhaps humans are not as simple as I believed." Jax blinked, caught between relief and disbelief. Praise from Zara was rare, and her words carried weight he could hardly measure. For the first time, he felt that his humanity, the very thing the Council seemed to dismiss, was a strength. Days turned into weeks. Jax continued his lessons, learning Varen etiquette, language subtleties, and strategic thinking. He observed Zara in her interactions with other diplomats, noting her intelligence, her patience, and the subtle ways she influenced decisions without force. The more he watched, the more he realized that survival in this world required understanding more than raw strength. It required perception, empathy, and insight. One evening, a message arrived from the Council. A distant system, recently contacted by humans, was under threat from an aggressive alien faction. Zara was called to lead a diplomatic negotiation to prevent war. Jax was invited to accompany her, not as a passenger, but as a partner in planning. The journey to the negotiation site was tense. Jax studied every move, every gesture, trying to predict outcomes. He suggested alternatives, strategies that relied on unpredictability and creativity, drawing from his human perspective. Zara listened, evaluating each suggestion with meticulous care. To his surprise, she approved several, trusting his instincts where they diverged from her centuries of experience. The negotiation itself was a spectacle. Alien delegates filled the room, their languages and gestures strange, intimidating, and precise. For hours, the talks proceeded with careful calculation. Jax's role was subtle but critical. He noticed nuances others missed, a hesitation, a glance, a shift in posture. Acting on instinct, he proposed a compromise that seemed simple but addressed underlying tensions. Zara presented it formally and the Council approved. The crisis was averted. Afterwards, Zara remained quiet, but for the first time she allowed a faint smile. "You did well," she said. "You acted with insight, courage, and humor. These are not traits I expected from humans." Jax felt a warmth he had not anticipated. Approval from Zara was rare, and it carried meaning far beyond simple praise. For the first time, he felt that he was not merely surviving, he was contributing, proving the value of his species in ways even the Varens could respect. But the challenges were far from over. The Council had made it clear. Humans were still young, reckless, and untested. Jax's actions had earned temporary recognition, but any mistake could undo all progress. He began to feel a quiet pressure, a responsibility he had never known before. Survival was no longer enough. He had to excel, to prove that humans could stand among the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations. In quiet moments, he began to understand Zara differently. She was not just an authority, not just a disciplinarian. She was a teacher, a strategist, and perhaps someone who could recognize potential where others saw only flaws. He watched her, learning not just from instruction but from observation. Every decision she made, every word she spoke, carried lessons about patience, intelligence, and resilience. One night, after a long day of planning and simulations, Jax stood alone on the balcony once more. The city below sparkled with life, an intricate network of lights and energy. He thought about Earth, about the human race, about his own journey. He realized that survival alone was not enough. Humans had the capacity for ingenuity, courage, and heart, qualities that could challenge even the most advanced species. And perhaps, just perhaps, his punishment was becoming an unexpected opportunity. Zara joined him silently, as she often did, and together they looked out over the city. "You are growing," she said quietly. "Not in ways I anticipated, but in ways that matter." Jax nodded, understanding that her words were both acknowledgement and challenge. He was learning, adapting, and most importantly, proving that humanity had value in a galaxy that had once dismissed them. The journey was far from over, and the road ahead would be filled with trials, dangers, and unexpected revelations. But for the first time, Jax Carter felt that he was not alone in facing it. His human instincts, combined with the lessons of Vera, were giving him a chance not just to survive, but to thrive. And in that moment, he realized that the punishment the council had imposed, the forced marriage, the constant scrutiny, the impossible expectations, was shaping him into something stronger, something the galaxy would soon have to reckon with. And though love had no place in the plan, a subtle bond was forming. Not yet passion, not yet affection, but a connection built on respect, challenge, and shared purpose. It was fragile, delicate, and entirely unexpected. Jax took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air of Vera Prime on his face. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he would not fail. Humans were not just survivors, they were unpredictable, clever, and resilient. And he, Jax Carter, was determined to prove it. The stars above, endless and indifferent, seemed to shimmer with possibility. Jax's punishment had become a battlefield, a classroom, and a proving ground. And he was ready to face whatever came next. The crisis came suddenly, without warning. A neighboring alien system, the Krellans, had begun aggressive maneuvers near Vera's borders. Their ships moved like shadows, silent, precise, and threatening. The Interstellar Council had warned of their unpredictability, and now the warning had become a reality. Jax Carter stood on the bridge of Zara's flagship, the Veran city sprawling beneath them in distant lights. He had never imagined that he would witness a potential war from such a vantage point, let alone be an active participant in its resolution. Yet here he was, his human instincts and newly learned strategies about to be tested on a scale he had never known. Zara moved with the calm precision of someone who had faced countless crises. Every gesture was deliberate, every command calculated. She spoke to the crew in a language Jax barely understood, yet he could sense the weight behind her words. And then, turning to him, she said, "Jax, I need you to monitor the fleet's approaches. Look for patterns they expect us to ignore." Jax's heart raced. This was unlike any simulation, any practice exercise he had faced before. Lives were at stake, Verans, humans, and potentially entire planetary systems. He focused, observing the Krellan movements with careful attention, looking for inconsistencies, weaknesses, anything that could give them an advantage. Hours passed in tense silence. The Krellans executed maneuvers that would have stumped any traditional strategist, yet Jax noticed subtle deviations. Their ships left gaps in formations, repeated patterns too quickly, and showed hesitation at key points. It was human intuition combined with his study of Veran tactics that allowed him to see what the Council and Zara might have missed. "Zara," he said quietly, pointing to the screens, "they're expecting us to follow standard protocol. If we exploit their hesitation here..." He traced a path across the holographic display, showing an unconventional maneuver that would place the Krellans at a disadvantage. Zara studied his suggestion, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Jax feared he had misjudged everything, that she would dismiss him as inexperienced, reckless, and human. But then she nodded. "Execute it," she said. The fleet moved as he indicated, and the Krellans faltered. Their formations broke under the unexpected strategy, leaving them vulnerable. Veran ships moved with deadly precision, striking where Jax had predicted. The battle was swift, decisive, and brilliant. The Krellans, once a looming threat, were forced to retreat, leaving Vera's borders secure. After the engagement, the Council convened. Delegates from multiple worlds gathered to assess the outcome, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and respect. Zara stood beside Jax, her presence commanding, yet she allowed him to step forward. "You have acted with courage, intellect, and decisiveness," a council member said, addressing him directly. "You have demonstrated the strength of your species and your own abilities. Humans are no longer simply reckless participants in galactic affairs. They are a species to be considered, respected, and feared when necessary." Jax's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. After weeks of punishment, training, and scrutiny, he had not only survived but had earned recognition for humanity itself. Zara remained beside him, silent, yet her eyes held something different now: acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps the first glimmer of admiration. "You performed well," she said quietly when the council concluded. "Your instincts, combined with what you have learned, have proven invaluable." Jax nodded, feeling the weight of her words more than the council's praise. He realized that the bond between them had shifted. It was not love, not yet, but something stronger, mutual respect forged in the crucible of shared challenge. The days that followed were a whirlwind of celebrations, diplomatic meetings, and recognition ceremonies. Humans, once considered naive and reckless, were now acknowledged as capable participants in interstellar politics. Jax received formal commendations, yet he found his attention often returning to Zara, watching her as she navigated the complexities of her world with unmatched skill. Despite the victory, the Council's sentence remained. Marriage, the original punishment, had not been revoked. But now it carried a different meaning. It was no longer a symbol of humiliation. Instead, it represented partnership, a bridge between human adaptability and Varen experience. Jax and Zara returned to her residence, the city glowing beneath them. For the first time, conversation flowed between them beyond lessons and formalities. They discussed strategy, philosophy, and the strange habits of humans and Varens alike. Jax found that Zara's wit was sharp, her humor subtle, and her curiosity surprisingly similar to his own. One evening, as they overlooked the city, Zara spoke softly. "Humans are unpredictable," she said. "I have underestimated you and your species, but today you have proven something extraordinary, not just courage, not just intellect, but resourcefulness that defies expectation." Jax smiled, feeling the tension of months ease from his shoulders. "I think humans have always had potential," he said. "Maybe we just needed the right challenge to show it." Zara's gaze softened, an expression Jax had never seen before. It was not warmth, not affection, but recognition. The kind that comes when one sees someone in their true capacity, beyond the surface, beyond expectation. The following weeks passed in a rhythm of continued diplomacy and preparation. Jax continued to learn, adapting his human intuition to complement Varen precision. Each success, each observation, reinforced the truth that humans were capable of greatness, not because they were alien, but because they were human. And as the stars stretched endlessly above Vera Prime, Jax understood the profound lesson of his punishment. It had been intended to humiliate, to teach submission, and perhaps to break his spirit. But instead it had challenged him, honed him, and given him a platform to prove not only his worth but the worth of humanity. Zara, once distant and inscrutable, now stood beside him as a teacher, mentor, and ally. The bond between them was no longer defined solely by punishment. It was a partnership forged in respect, shaped by adversity, and tempered by the extraordinary trials they had faced together. Jax knew that the Council's eyes would remain on him and humanity. They would expect more, scrutinize every move, and test every decision. But he also knew that humans had a strength the galaxy could not ignore: the ability to rise, to adapt, and to thrive even in the most alien circumstances. As he watched the horizon, Jax felt a quiet determination. The stars were vast, the challenges endless, but he was no longer the reckless scout who had stumbled into a Varen trap. He was a representative of his species, a human who had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. And in that strength, he carried the promise of humanity's place among the stars. Zara's presence beside him was steady, her eyes reflecting the city lights and the distant stars. They did not speak, and words were not necessary. They had shared triumph, strategy, and the proving of worth. In silence, they acknowledged the journey they had undertaken together, a journey that had begun as punishment and had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and often unforgiving. But Jax Carter, human among the stars, had learned that courage, intelligence, and integrity could carve a place even in the most alien of worlds. And though love had not been part of the original plan, a connection deeper than words had formed, a quiet understanding that could endure across the vastness of space. As the night deepened over Vera Prime, Jax felt a rare calm. The battle had been won, the Council impressed, and humanity's worth recognized. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. Greater challenges awaited, galaxies to explore, crises to navigate, and opportunities to prove that humans were more than capable of standing among the stars. And with Zara by his side, not as an enemy, not as a punisher, but as a partner, he felt ready. The punishment had transformed into purpose. The forced marriage, once a symbol of humiliation, had become a bridge, a path toward understanding, respect, and perhaps one day something even more profound. In the quiet glow of Vera Prime's lights, Jax Carter looked to the stars and smiled. Humanity had survived its trial. Humanity had proven its value. And for the first time, Jax truly believed that the impossible was only a challenge waiting to be overcome. The universe awaited, endless and unpredictable, but he was ready.